Hi, and welcome back to Pick Up the Pieces. We're in the pickup kitchen once again, and tonight we are going to make one of my favorite things. If you've ever watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which was a phenomenal show, you know that Mrs. Maisel, Midge, can pretty much get anybody to do anything she wants them to do if she gives them a brisket. And if you have never had a truly properly cooked brisket, then this is the video you want to watch. I'm honestly telling you, I would probably do some pretty shady stuff for a brisket. So, and you probably would too, especially if you try this recipe. So my grandmother taught me how to cook a brisket. This is how I've eaten it my whole life. This is not a barbecue brisket. I know that there's a lot of people who smoke the brisket or barbecue it. This is not that. This is truly just a wonderfully braised brisket. I also know there's a lot of people that are going to tell me I should sear this meat before I braise it, but again, that's not how we do it. So let me show you how we make an amazing brisket. So the first thing I'm going to do is use one of the roasting pans that my grandma gave me, and I adore this roasting pan. I don't know if it's just that it roasts so well or just that my grandma gave it to me, but it's phenomenal. And so I'm going to start this like I do a lot of other braised or cooked meats with a little raft of vegetables. So we're going to put in a bunch of carrots. I think that's probably about 4 or 5 carrots that I've peeled and sliced in half. I've got a little bit of celery. Now, we will eat the carrots, but we really don't eat the onions or the celery, so that is why there's a lot more carrots than everything else. And then I'm just putting some onions in there, and this is partially for flavor, but then also to keep the brisket from sticking to the bottom of the pan. So all my vegetables went in, and now I'm going to show you how to prepare the brisket. So I have 2 smaller briskets here. We get our meat from the Heartland Abattoir. It's a local butcher, and sometimes you get a big flap of a brisket, and sometimes you get smaller ones. So the last time we got a cow, we got 2 smaller ones. So I'm going to show you how you make this, but we're going to make both of them. And this is a 2-day cooking process. Today we're going to do the first cook on the brisket, and then tomorrow I'll be back to show you the rest of it. So I take a paring knife and I cut slits into my brisket, and I do this pretty much all over the surface of it. And each one of these little slits is going to get a whole clove of garlic. And I suppose you could skip this step if you wanted to, but I do not suggest skipping it because adding the whole cloves of garlic just does something very special to the meat. So I just then take my garlic and shove it into my little slits, and if your garlic slits don't want to cooperate, then move your knife the other direction, and then they should work for you. And if you have to make them bigger, you make them bigger. But basically, you're going to fill up all of these little holes with garlic. And that brisket is still a little bit frozen. This one is not. So I think I'm going to fight that one off camera, and I'll show you how to do it with this one that has had a little bit longer to thaw. I originally just took out this brisket thinking it would be enough. But then when I opened the package and realized it was sort of small, I figured I should take out the second one. So one of them has had a little bit more time out of the freezer than the other. So see, these garlic cloves are just going into the slits. And when this meat slow cooks, these garlic cloves will sort of, give all of their flavor into the meat, and it is amazing. Very easy to do. Just watch your fingers with your knife. And sometimes you make a slit and then you can't find it, so you just make another one. Now, there was a big hunk of fat here on this brisket, so I ended up trimming out. I mean, it was just massive. So I did trim out quite a bit of that fat. You need to leave some fat on a brisket when you cook it, but you don't want to leave quite that much. Your juices at the bottom of the pan would just end up way too fatty. So what I'll do is just create slices this direction and shove the garlic in that way. So it'll still add really great flavor. There is meat under that fat. but it's just sort of an oddly shaped piece of meat. So, you know, you kind of got to do what you got to do. So there, and then I'll shove a couple more pieces. And really, you just put as much garlic in here as you want to. You don't want to, you know, substitute just like some garlic powder or something. You really want to get these hunks of garlic in your meat. This is just like a really critical step to add great flavor. And I'm not 100% sure that my grandma did this step. I think it's just something I may have added through the years. But that one is all set. And now I'm going to work with this one off camera, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all stuffed with garlic. I've managed to get all of these garlic cloves shoved into our brisket. And as you can see, like I said, I just kind of made slits and then like shoved the garlic in. And now we're ready to season this up and then get it in the oven. So my grandmother always used Lipton Onion Soup, just the mix, and that is what I do as well. I do add a little bit of pepper, and I think I'll do that first. So just pepper the top of the meat. You don't need to add any salt because the Lipton like French onion soup mix, that's what we're using here, is going to have plenty of salt in it. And so I am just going to sprinkle this over the top. And I like to kind of mix up the packet a little bit before I sprinkle it so that everything is sort of evenly distributed, because you kind of have like onion flakes in here, but then you also have like a powder seasoning. So the onion flakes and the powder kind of get mixed together. And I'm doing that same thing with the second packet. And all I'm doing is creating sort of like a crust on top of the brisket with this, and it creates such good flavor on the brisket. I've tried to do this just with like seasonings, and to be honest, no seasoning ever comes close to duplicating the French onion soup packet, and so that's what I go with. And so I'm just kind of evenly spreading this on the top of the briskets. And so that's all set. And now, oh, some of my garlic is trying to escape. Okay, so now I'm going to dump in a beer. And so you want to use a dark beer. We use Guinness for this. You could use any kind of stout or dark beer. I've used Yingling before, like sort of, I guess it was like a brown ale or something like that. You could do that, but the darker the beer, the better on this. And so I've even used like just a Mick Ultra before, if that's all I had. But the Guinness is just phenomenal and adds such good flavor. So I am just going to add the Guinness, and I'm careful to pour it on the side of the meat. Like, I don't want to pour it on top of the meat and then displace all of that soup mix that I put on there. So I try to just pour it around and not on top. And in addition to the beer, I've mixed up some Better Than Bouillon beef stock. And I just don't have any homemade right now, so this is what we're going to use. I'm going to add about a cup. And then if we need to add more, we can add more. Yeah, we need to add more. So 2 cups of our Better Than Bouillon went in, and there's a little bit of that left there. So 2 cups of beef broth. Like I said, I used Better Than Bouillon. You could just use like a jug of, like whatever kind of beef stock you can buy at the store. You can make your own, but that goes in there. Now I'm going to cover this tightly with foil and bake this at 325 for probably 6 to 8 hours. The longer, the better. Then tomorrow, after this has cooled in the fridge overnight, we're going to slice it really, really, really thinly, put it back in the pan, and continue to cook it a little longer. And I know it sounds like a long cooking time, but this brisket will be fall apart, deliciously tender, and phenomenal cooked this way. I've done it this way my whole life. So I'm going to cover this with foil and get it in the oven, and then I will show you what it looks like when this step is done. And then we'll be back in the morning to cook it for the second time. Our brisket has cooked for about 5.5 hours, something like that. I forgot exactly what time I put it in the oven. but it was either 5.5 or 6 hours. And so this is exactly what you want to see. The brisket shrinks quite a bit. We've got some nice caramelization, lots of delicious pan juices. And this is going to cool, and then we are going to refrigerate overnight. Then tomorrow I will slice it very, very thinly, put it back in the pan. We can add a little bit more beef broth tomorrow if we need to, and then it will cook for another couple of hours. And so I will show you what it looks like in the morning. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Pickup Kitchen. I am now going to slice up my cooled brisket. Our brisket cooked yesterday at 325 for about 5.5 or 6 hours, and then it sat in the fridge overnight to chill. And now this evening, or I guess this afternoon, I'm going to slice this really, really thinly, put it back in the pan juices, and we're going to cover it and put it back in the oven at 300 degrees for another 2 or 3 hours. Now with brisket, it can be a really tough cut of meat if you don't treat it properly. When you slice your brisket and you go to eat it, you want to slice it against the grain. So the grain on this piece of meat is going this way, so that means I'm going to slice it perpendicular to the way it's going. If I was to slice this with the grain, then the meat would end up really shredded and stringy, and the texture would not be very good. So I'm going to try my best, and this is like my favorite little carving knife. It's fantastic. I'm going to slice this as thin as I can, aiming for about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to slice the whole thing and then also the second piece and then put it back in. So because this is cold and it was in the refrigerator overnight, it should slice pretty easily. This piece kind of wanted to fall off, so that's okay. I'll just move that to the side and I'll slice that by itself. But here I'm going to make slices, and now this is cold. It just came out from the fridge. So I'm just going to be very cautious. I don't want my knife to slip. I don't want my fingers to slip. But this is exactly what you want to see. You want to see nice slices of meat with the grain going that way, little bits of garlic, some carrots stuck to the bottom. It's absolutely delicious. And the French onion soup that we sprinkled on the top makes like a lovely crust on the top. So you just want to do your best to not disrupt that at all. And like I said, I'm just slicing no more than 1/4 inch thick whenever possible. If it is a little thicker, that's fine, but thinner is better. And this will just, like I said, cook kind of low and slow in the oven again today. You really do want this to cook over the 2 days. You don't want to rush this process. There's something special about this brisket, the way that it cooks, and cooking it like over the 2-day time period, like I said, is just what makes it so fantastic. So I'm going to continue to slice this. And I'm just going to carefully lift up this meat and get it back in the pan. And you want to kind of keep it together like that. And we will make sure to spoon the juices over the top. I do have a little extra beef broth made up here just in case we need a little extra liquid in the pan. But right now I'm going to just continue to slice this against the grain and get this little piece back in there. And then I will slice up our second piece. And all these little bits of meat and seasoning are just going to go right back in the pan. And then, like I said, this one I'm going to do the same thing. And it looks like our grain is going this way. Now this top piece, no, that's all right. I wasn't sure if this brisket had like a cap on it. Sometimes when you get a brisket, it'll be sort of like there's a bottom piece of meat and then the top piece. And I can't remember what it's called, but I know that the top piece is sometimes used to make burn ends, like in the barbecue world. I couldn't remember what the name of it was, but that's not the case. I just have like an odd-shaped piece of brisket. So I'm going to cut it again perpendicular. And there is quite a bit of fat on this piece of brisket, and that's fine. Fat is flavor. When you go to eat your brisket, you know, you can trim away some of the excess fat. Some of it will sort of melt away in the pan. But this is exactly what you want to do, is just cut it thinly against the grain, and it will be perfect. And you will know if you're cutting it the wrong way, because as you cut, it will shred. It won't actually slice like this and stay in pieces. It'll just end up shredding everywhere. So then if that happens, just rotate your piece of meat and then try it the other direction, and then you should be good. Our brisket is completely sliced, so I'm going to put this back in the pan, and like I said, it looks beautiful for serving if you're able to kind of keep your brisket like intact when you put it back in the pan like that. So it's just, it looks very pretty that way. And like I said, all those little bits are absolutely delicious. And then I am going to add a little bit of extra broth here. We've got lots of lovely juices on the bottom here, but I'm just going to pour some freshly made beef stock. This is made with Better Than Bouillon. Beef concentrate basically is what it is, and you mix a spoonful of that with some hot water, and that's what I did, and now I poured it over here. So we're going to cover this, and like I said, this delicious brisket is going to go back in the oven, 300 degrees, 2 or 3 hours, and I will show you what it looks like when it's done. Our brisket is back in the oven, and I thought it would be nice to have an apple cake to go with our dinner. Our dinner tonight is going to be our brisket and some mashed potatoes. We're doing some sauteed green beans with mushrooms. It's a new recipe that we found in a magazine that we get, so we're going to try that out, and if we like it, we may add it to Thanksgiving. And then for dessert, we're going to have this apple upside down cake. So we found this caramel apple upside down cake recipe on Pinterest. I'll link the recipes in the description for you. And so this, it looks delicious, and so we're going to give it a try. So the first thing I need to do is preheat the oven to 350 degrees, which I did, and then we prepare a 9-inch round cake pan, which I've done. So now in a small saucepan, I'm going to melt 4 tablespoons of butter. So I will get that going. So while that is melting, I'm going to peel, core, and slice apples. So an apple core and slicer is going to help me out. I am going to peel these, and then I'll use my apple slicer, which will core them, and then all I have to do is take the slices and just cut them a little thinner. So it's just kind of like a easier method. I could certainly just, peel these apples and cut them myself by hand, but I'm going to take the convenience of using this tool. These are Honeycrisp apples. The recipe said to either use Honeycrisp or something like a Granny Smith. So we don't really like the super tart Granny Smith apples. We prefer Honeycrisp for sure. So that is what we are doing. And I think this is going to go really nicely with our brisket meal. And we are going to share some of this entire meal with my parents who live close by. We're going to drop off dinner to them when it's ready. So they'll get a little dessert tonight too. And this was a recipe that we were curious about. We like making an apple dessert for Thanksgiving, but we don't always feel like we have to do an apple pie. Sometimes we like to change it up a little bit. So I think we figured we would try this recipe to see if we like it. And if we like it, maybe for Thanksgiving this year, we will do this instead of apple pie. Now, by the time you see this video, Thanksgiving may have already happened. So, but we are going to try this tonight. So my butter is melted. And I am going to add 3/4 cup packed brown sugar and some cinnamon and some salt to that butter. So I make my own brown sugar. All I do is take regular granulated sugar, I mix it with molasses, and it looks like I'm going to need more of this soon. So I think the next time I bake with you, then I will show you how to make brown sugar. But this 3/4 cup packed brown sugar is going to go here in the pan. And then to that, we are going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and also 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Oh, that smells amazing. And that is going to make a delicious caramel on the bottom of this pan. So it says to let that simmer for about a minute. So brown sugar, cinnamon, salt, stir till combined, bubble for a minute, then pour into the pan. Then you put your apples on top of that. So I'm just going to finish peeling these apples. And I don't mind if there's a tiny bit of skin in there. Now, I find with an apple core slicer like this, if you core them from the bottom, they seem to core more evenly than if you try to do it from the top. I don't know why, but that is what I've noticed in the years that I've used this. So I just press from the bottom, and now my core is out, and then I can always trim off that little bit of skin that seems to be clinging to a couple of pieces, but this makes cutting up some apples an easy task. And then now I just have to slice them a little bit thinner, and then they can go right in the pan on top of the caramel. The caramel has to go first. So I will check on that in a moment. But now all my apples are sliced into chunks, and I just have to slice them a little bit thinner. And this is not quite bubbling. I'm going to turn it up just a tiny bit. I don't want to burn this, but it needs to be bubbling a little bit more to go on the bottom of the pan. So we'll turn that up a little bit, and in the meantime, I will slice these apples. So I've got a little bit of skin still on some of these pieces of apple, but that's fine. I'm just going to trim that off. And then all I'm going to do here is just turn the apple on its side and just slice these like that. So each piece of apple gets sliced into 4 or 5 slices. And then see, this is much easier than trying to take a whole apple and slice it perfectly like that. So I'm just going to do that with all of my little apple chunks. And then I need to pour the caramel in and then decorate, put these apples in sort of in a pretty decoration, I guess, is what we want it to do, because this is an apple upside down cake. So when the cake is ready, we're going to put it on a plate, invert it, so you will see the beautiful apples at the top. Now, the recipe says to put these apples in a bowl with some lemon juice. We're doing that so that they don't start to turn brown. So while I've got those sliced, I'm going to get them in there so that they don't start turning color on me while we're waiting for our caramel. Let's check our caramel. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I think that looks pretty good. And this smells wonderful. So I'm going to set this, put this in the pan, which is what the recipe says to do, and get this kind of spread out. I have no doubt that this will cook when the apples cook, and it's going to brown up, like caramelize. It smells wonderful. There's a little bit of extra butter floating around in there, but I don't think that's going to hurt anything. I think this is going to be perfect. So I just made a nice even layer of this caramel, and then these apples are going to go down in a moment. So like I said, we sometimes like to vary up our Thanksgiving menu. We always do sort of the standard stuff like the turkey and the stuffing and the potatoes, but sometimes dessert, we will do something a little different. So I think we're kind of trying this recipe now to see if maybe we want to do this for Thanksgiving rather than like a crumble or a pie or something. Brisket, incidentally, does make a delicious Thanksgiving alternative. You know, if people in your household don't like turkey, You know, you could do a pork roast, you could just do some roasted chicken, but a brisket is special and wonderful. And we had 2 briskets in the freezer because we get our beef from a local butcher called the Heartland Abattoir. So we had 2 briskets sitting in the freezer that we needed to use up. We are on the list now to get another quarter of a cow when one is available. So right now our focus is using what we have in the freezer so that when we get our new cow, we have room for it, and we've eaten up everything from the previous order. And so we just have some chuck roasts left. I think we have some cube steaks left. We have some ground beef left, but for the most part, we've used up everything. So I'm gonna layer these apples in, and then I will toss these in the lemon juice and then layer them in as well. And it just says, arrange in a decorative pattern. So I don't know, I'll wing it. I don't really know how decorative this is gonna look, but I'm just gonna layer these in like a circle and keep going until I use them all up. Hopefully this will look and taste delicious. I have a feeling once we put some batter on this and we put this in the oven and bake it, like what it actually looks like isn't gonna matter so much because I think it's gonna be delicious. I don't know if starting on the inside and working my way out would have been better, but like I said, when it's done, I don't know that it will matter. I think it's just going to be delicious. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I really don't think anyone in my family is going to critique what this looks like when it's done. I think they're going to think it's delicious. All right, I figured out that if you keep your apples sort of all in the same direction, they look a little bit better than if you're just plopping them in. So I'm probably not going to win any Michelin stars for my apple dessert here, but I think it turned out okay. So my apples are ready with the caramel underneath it, and now we're going to make the cake portion. So I need to beat softened butter and sugar until light and fluffy. So there is 1 stick, half a cup, which is 1 stick, right? Yeah. Half a cup, which is 1 stick of butter, and it's softened. This I softened in my microwave and it melted a little bit, but then once I let it sit on the counter for a few minutes, now it's more soft and less melty. And then I need 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. And that is 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And we are going to beat this with our paddle attachment for about 3 or 4 minutes until it gets fluffy. Our butter and sugar are nicely combined, so we are going to add our eggs. And so that's 2 eggs, 1 at a time. And also the vanilla. I think the recipe says a teaspoon of vanilla, but we know I'm not going to measure that really. I don't even know why I look. I just pour some in. And we're going to let that combine, and then we'll combine in the second egg. I just want to scrape off some of this butter from the paddle to make sure it gets mixed in thoroughly. It's kind of sticking, but our sides seem to be scraped down nicely. There's not a lot of butter sticking to the sides, so we'll just get what's on the paddle off. And now we're going to give this another little whip, and then we'll start adding the dry ingredients. Our wet ingredients seem to be nicely combined. we need to add our baking powder, salt, cinnamon, nutmeg, and flour. Now the recipe says to mix all those ingredients in another bowl and then add those in alternating with milk. And you know, I'm kind of tired. I just want to get this cake in the oven. And I know that like there's some bakers out there that are going to insist I should have done it that way. But to be honest, I'm just going to get this going, and I am sure it will come out just fine. I will get my dry ingredients like the baking powder, salt, cinnamon, nutmeg in first, give it a quick mix, and then I'll slowly add the flour a little bit at a time, alternating with the milk, and that should be close enough. So 1.5 teaspoons of my baking powder and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. If you have fresh nutmeg, that would be great here. I have some ground nutmeg, which is what I'm going to use, but fresh would be wonderful. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I will need 1.5 cups of flour. So I'll do that in 3 separate additions with my 1/2 cup measure. Adding the flour in 3 separate additions, alternating with the milk, then will help the texture to be lovely. I'm just scraping down the cinnamon and nutmeg and everything that I just put in. This smells wonderful. Okay, so beginning and ending with flour is what it says to do. So we'll do 1/2 cup of flour, mix that in, add a little milk, and then a little flour, a little milk, a little flour, and then we should be good. So far that looks great. I'm just going to scrape down my sides a little bit, get some of that flour in there. Looks and smells lovely. Get my mixer out of the way. And I want to scrape off the extra batter here that's on the beater, and then I'm just going to combine the rest of this cake batter with my spatula so that I don't overmix it. I don't want it to end up tough. So I'm just going to use a little elbow grease to get it combined. And it is a good thing that I am giving this a good mix at the end here, because there's a little bit of butter sort of stuck at the bottom, which I was able to get incorporated in here. So that was a good thing. want to use a little bit more of a sturdier whisk to scrape the bottom of this. This one is very flexible, and I feel like it's not doing a great job catching all that butter on the bottom, so we will scrape this one off and use a firmer whisk or a firmer spatula. All right, and now this gets poured onto the apples. I am going to be cooking this on a pan for sure because I don't want this to bubble over and make a mess in my oven. But this looks very full, and it should rise a little bit while it bakes, so we are going to make sure, and the recipe did say to like tap it down to get air bubbles out of it. So I'm going to get this in the oven, and as usual, I will show you what it looks like when it is done. Our brisket is almost ready, and our apple cake came out of the oven. I think this was a win-win, so I guess it didn't really matter how cute my apples were on the top because you really can't tell if they're arranged beautifully or not, and that caramel looks amazing and this smells amazing, so we're very excited to try this later on. But in the meantime, while our brisket finishes cooking, we're just going to make a side dish to go with our brisket. We have some leftover mashed potatoes that we pulled out of the freezer. We're just going to heat those up in a saucepan, and we're going to do some simple roasted green beans. Now, I found a recipe in a magazine that we get that said it was like a pan sauteed green bean with like onions and all sorts of, and it just looked really complicated, and I'm just not in the mood for complicated right now, so I decided just to roast the green beans. And the recipe just had onions and mushrooms with the green beans, and I thought, you know, instead of pan searing all of that and messing up another pan, I could just put it in the oven and see how it goes. So we've got a package of green beans and about a half of a yellow onion that we sliced up here. And so I'm going to get that on the pan with the green beans. And then we've got an 8-ounce package of sliced mushrooms, and I'm going to throw these right on the top. Some of these bigger ones I think I'm just going to break up a little bit with my hands. My hands are clean. And so these are just going to get baked in the oven at 400 degrees, and I'm just going to season these really simply. I'm just going to drizzle on some olive oil. And I'm going to put some salt and pepper. And I'm going to add a little fresh thyme as well, or no, I lie. It's dry thyme. I'm also going to add a little bit of dried thyme. If you had a little bit of fresh, that would be great too, but I'm just going to add a little bit of dried. Thyme goes really, really well with mushrooms. And I am just going to put this in the oven just as is, 400 degrees, probably about 20, 25 minutes, and then I'll check them. And this will be really great to go with our brisket and mashed potatoes. So we've had another successful day of cooking here in the Pickup Kitchen, and I wanted to show you a little bit of what dinner is going to look like tonight. Now, we're not quite ready to eat yet, but I figured I'd take a little taste of everything and show you how it came out. Just a little bit of mashed potato. This is our brisket, which is just tender and looks absolutely delicious. And then our roasted green bean with mushroom and onion. And so I'm just going to take a little bite. I usually do like a little potato with my meat. That's how I like to eat it. It came out so good. I know that cooking meat for 2 days sounds like it would come out terrible, that it would be dry and awful, but you have to trust me. This is the only way to cook a brisket. It is absolutely delicious, just melts in your mouth. And that concentrated flavor from the beer, the onion soup mix, the garlic, and all those vegetables that sort of slow cook underneath the meat, it's just phenomenal. and it's one of our favorite meals that we tend to do for more like a holiday meal. It's not like a weekly or a monthly thing. Brisket is more of a special occasion thing, but we absolutely love it. And then these green beans and mushroom, they roasted in the oven. The vegetables still have a little bit of bite to them. I don't like mushy vegetables, so I'm glad that they turned out that way. Just a little salt and pepper and olive oil is all you need. And then I have to admit, we already snuck a bite of this apple caramel upside down cake. I packaged up some to send to my parents, and I am telling you, my husband claimed that this might be his favorite new apple dessert. And he said that I should make it for every holiday from now on. This is great because it's a lot of really soft, nice apples. That brown sugar caramel just adds so much nice sweetness and almost a little texture to the apple. And then that cake is just really soft. And that caramel, in a way, sort of like the butter from it absorbs into the cake, and just the cake is really moist and delicious, and it's not dry by any means. It's not a pancake texture. It's definitely a cake texture, and I wouldn't say it's as dense as a pound cake, but it is a denser cake. But it came out absolutely delicious, and I'm gonna eat another piece of it. So I would like to thank you for joining us in the Pickup Kitchen. I'm so thankful that you are here and appreciative that y'all are watching these videos. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Good night.